So I have this friend, and I've been going to his church for a while, and he's a King James onlyist, and he's pretty fundamentalist, and he's hardcore about some of the things that he believes. And I have a lot of respect for him and the way that he lives his life, and he thinks about things. But he can get a little bit legalistic about the Bible at times, and I think a lot of times he gets really passive aggressive about some of his preaching. And if he sees that, or he thinks that somebody's doing something that's not very good in their personal life, he's one of the type of guys that will, make a sermon about it the next week or two when he learns something about you that isn't, 100% Christian, whatever it is. Now, if somebody personally in their life wants to live up to a really high standard of Christianity, that's fine, but you can't expect every Christian to be as good as the next Christian. We all have our struggles and our problems. But he was teaching a message one time, and I think it was directed either to me or somebody else in the audience. And he keeps talking about the sin which leadeth unto death. And he talks about how a Bible pastor of his up in a town where he preaches was talking about how there's this sin that leads unto death, and there was a kid in the youth group, and he was once on fire for God, but then he met a girl and started messing around with her, and then he stopped coming to the youth group, and then all of a sudden, after a certain amount of time, he got into a car accident, and all they found was the belt buckle or something. And him and his father have also talked about other times where they've seen somebody who was a good Christian, and then they fell away and they fell into death or something. And the verse comes from 1 John chapter 5. I think it's 16 or 17. I'll read it off right here. It says, "If any man see his brother sin, a sin which is not unto death, he shall ask, and he shall give him life for them that sin not unto death. There is a sin unto death. I do not say that he shall pray for it. All unrighteousness is sin, and there is a sin not unto death. We know that whosoever is born of God sinneth not, but he that is begotten of God keepeth himself, and that wicked one toucheth him not." And basically, they get from these verses in this book that there is a sin that once you sin, it leadeth unto death, and finally you die, and then God takes you out of this world. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, how many pastors use this idea, and I don't know how biblical it is really, or if they just kind of misinterpret the passage to scare people into, maybe it's a good thing to scare people away from certain sin, because sin is not good, of course, but they might look at somebody's life and be judgmental about it and think, hey, you have all these problems, you're about to sin unto death, and you shall die in a horrible accident. But I think in my life, how many good people I've known, and some of them were really good, and then they died young. And then there were some guys that I've known were complete a-holes and lived long, prosperous lives and died in a bed somewhere. And it just seems to me like a very ridiculous thing to kind of heave onto somebody that you're going to die the sin of death, as if we know who's really going to do that or not. And I think there's a kind of religious narcissism from people like this, who kind of think they know, what your problems are and what problems you have in life and whatnot. And, if you want to believe something like this, it's okay, but it doesn't seem to me like it's 100% biblical. If anybody has any response to this, or knows more about it than I do, perhaps, or can go on a deeper study of it, argue with me if you want. But I think of it as a ridiculous idea. Put in the comment section and tell me what you think. Out.